From the most trusted names in local news, KDPG Sunday Edition.
Good morning and welcome to the KDPG Sunday Edition. I'm Megan Schiller. Well, this morning on the KDPG, we are joined by Patrick Nightingale, a defense attorney and head of the Pittsburgh chapter of NORML. That stands for the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. We're also joined by the Lieutenant Governor himself, former Mayor of Braddock, John Fetterman. So welcome to you both. Really excited to have you both here.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on.
Thank you. So this has been a huge topic in the news in the past couple weeks, especially, and you had just mentioned before the number of big names that have been coming on and offering their opinion one way or the other.
Yeah, it's tremendously exciting. And first and foremost, I want to thank the Lieutenant Governor for fulfilling his pledge to Pennsylvanians. He said, you know, I'm going to go out across Pennsylvania. I'm going to go to every corner of the Commonwealth, all 67 counties, and listen to people. I'm not going there with an agenda. I'm not going there to advocate. I just want to hear what Pennsylvanians have to say. And the report that the Lieutenant Governor's office published, I think, you know, accurately reflects that a majority of Pennsylvanians are ready to turn the tide on cannabis prohibition. So for that, Lieutenant Governor, thank you very, very much for doing that and, you know, allowing Pennsylvanians to have their voices heard, because often we don't get that in some of the heated political rhetoric that may come from majority leader of the Senate or the Speaker of the House. But when you listen to Pennsylvanians, I believe that Pennsylvanians have come forth and said, we're ready for this. Now the governor is saying we're ready for legalization. The Auditor General had already made the economic case for legalization, and now the Attorney General, Pennsylvania's top law enforcement officer, also supports legalization. And
we're not just talking 50% of people, right?
Yeah, well, the thing is that I try to remind people that prohibition of cannabis adult use is a true minority viewpoint in Pennsylvania. This isn't some fringe belief that's being advanced by a small segment of the Commonwealth. This is a overwhelmingly popular proposition. And when you break down things like decriminalization and expungement, those approach a supermajority. In fact, we couldn't find one single Pennsylvanian that believes that cannabis should remain as a Schedule I substance. Not one. Even those that weren't ready for it recreationally said, the fact that it's classified in this manner is absurd, and that needs to change. And that's why our governor, who has exercised great leadership throughout this, has called for decriminalization with the legislature, expungement through legislation, and calling on our congressional delegation to say, look, pull this from Schedule I.
And your office, right, has the ability to pardon people. You asked for people who maybe they're not getting jobs because they have this on their record, and you want to help them out.
Well, once again, I reference Governor Wolf's great leadership on this because he ultimately signs these, but I chair the Board of Pardons, and we want to make sure that we can, obviously legislation would be ideal, but we can do this expungement via pardon, and we want to make sure that that's an option for Pennsylvanians, and it doesn't cost anything now, waive the fee. So, you know, I say the only thing you have to lose is your record.
Now, Pennsylvania, it's not like they would be the first state to make this happen. You know, in your experience, the states that have already, right, there's 10 of them, right? And has it been going well?
It's been going extremely well. You know, Massachusetts now has a full adult use program, and they are really taking the opportunity to address issues of restorative justice, to try to promote those who have been disproportionately impacted, to allow them to actually enter into the cannabis industry and to realize some of the tremendous benefits, the employment benefits, the investment opportunities. One of the things that I think is so important about what the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor have said about expungements and pardons is that a lot of adult use regulation has laws that says if you have cannabis convictions, if you've got felony cannabis convictions, you are frozen out of the cannabis industry. This will allow people to have that opportunity to participate in the industry. And one of the things that we've seen through the history of cannabis prohibition in the United States is that has greatly impacted in a disproportionate fashion communities of color in the Commonwealth. Let these people who have already suffered from the war on cannabis now enter into the emerging cannabis industry.
What stories have you heard from people that are coming out to the meetings? Because you said some areas had a ton of people that came out, and then other areas you think would have a lot had hardly anyone.
We had over 10,000 residents come out to these meetings. meetings, which is a staggering number. And we had over 40,000 online comments too. And so we had a full conversation. Some people say, well, why don't you put it on the ballot? Well, you can't. Constitutionally, that's not permitted in Pennsylvania to do it on the ballot. So this was the only way to have a full-on conversation with Pennsylvania, and that's exactly what we did. And we had the biggest crowd of over 450 people in Lancaster come out. And then our smaller crowds were in areas like Philadelphia or in the city of Pittsburgh, because it's much more of a foregone conclusion. People are almost unanimous about that. So we went from the smallest county, Cameron, 5,000, and all the way up to the biggest city, one of the biggest cities in the country. And we had a great dialogue, and we were here to hear from everybody. And we heard pros, cons, and those that were undecided, but it's clearly a majority of Pennsylvanians are ready for this.
What do you say to people that are on the other side, that say that they believe that it's a gateway drug, or they worry?
Yeah, I can speak to that. A lot of people were worried about teenage use. They were worried about the gateway drug. And I would say, in my experience listening to Pennsylvanians, it is a gateway drug away from opioids. It's a gateway drug away from other addictions, because it allowed them to feel normal, particularly among our veterans. I can't tell you how many veterans we had come to our meetings. Some would even break down in tears, and they said that the one thing that makes me feel normal is the one thing that I can't get from the VA. And the country that I was damaged, protecting and defending, would label me a criminal by using this substance. And because it's a Schedule I drug, the VA cannot and will not prescribe that. So we heard a lot of stories like that. And the way it's touched the veterans was one of the emerging themes from the tour.
What about the Attorney General and Josh Shapiro now coming out and saying this? And I know on your website it has a lot about how they're classified. We have the misdemeanors and the felonies, and you even have an area on your website where people can reach out for help if they are fighting against that. Kind of talk a little bit about how your agency is helping people.
One of the things that we try to do is to provide education. One of the things that cannabis consumers in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania don't necessarily have is someone to reach out to for accurate information about the state of the law, accurate information about our medical cannabis program, realistic guidance about things like DUI law, Second Amendment rights. So, we try to act as an information clearinghouse to reach people that might not otherwise be engaging with their legislators, or otherwise engaging with attorneys or people that have some more advanced knowledge of this subject. And knowledge, I think, is key, so that cannabis consumers understand both the rights that we are asserting for them in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the very real risks that are associated with being a cannabis consumer. It remains Schedule I and illegal for Pennsylvanians who are not participating in our medical cannabis program. Whether you are a registered patient or a black market consumer, there are very real risks of being prosecuted for DUI, regardless of whether or not you are actually impaired by cannabis. So we really want to make sure that Pennsylvanians are as fully advised about the state of cannabis reform in Pennsylvania. I know one concern that we have is there seems to be an almost attitude that it is decriminalized, it is de facto legal, and you have people that are acting in a manner that unfortunately invites law enforcement interactions. And we need to make sure that even though it's been decriminalized in Philadelphia, even though we passed a decriminalization ordinance here in Pittsburgh, there are still very real risks for law enforcement interaction and prosecution. And there are other counties outside of Allegheny County where you will be prosecuted to conviction for even having less than a gram of marijuana.
I was shocked because I was on your Twitter page for NORML, and it says every 48 seconds someone is arrested for marijuana, which would be time consuming if you're in law enforcement.
It just doesn't make sense. And I heard from a lot of law enforcement officials, and they're just like, we have bigger problems, we have bigger issues. It would be liberating to not have to worry about this. And some people deliberately conflate legal with harmless, to say, well, and no one suggests that it's harmless. It actually has an effect. That's the whole point. If it didn't, people could smoke their lawn clippings. But the bottom line is that look at alcohol, look at tobacco. These substances are harmful and are deadly, or motorcycles or handguns. But these are legal and they're regulated. And this is about migrating cannabis to people. I heard over and over again, people went, Pennsylvania cannabis grown on Pennsylvania farms, producing Pennsylvania jobs and producing Pennsylvania tax revenue. And we, in law enforcement, I think is really coming around to that because they don't want the burden and they don't want to be bothered with some of these things.
That's one big concern you always speak to about the DUIs that could come out of this. You know, well, they're not banning alcohol, is your argument, right?
Exactly. NORML's principles of responsible cannabis use include never operating a motor vehicle when impaired by cannabis. That is not responsible use, just as one should not operate a motor vehicle if they're impaired by alcohol.
And no one advocates for that.
Absolutely not.
No, not one Pennsylvanian on the tour said, you know what, we should have a, everyone wants it 21 or over. We're talking.
They say cannabis is safer than alcohol and opioids.
They're advocating for safe, responsible usage. And this idea that somehow it's legal and it's a free-for-all, no, it's absolutely not.
My last question is, how much money could this make, not just for the state, but for the local farmers that you mentioned, or for the people that...
Well, some of the portions of the state that need those kind of boosts the most are those ones that stand where they could grow it. Farmers need this. Hemp became legal, and the world hasn't spun off its axis. CBD is legal, the world didn't spin off its axis. Our medical marijuana program has worked beautifully in many respects. And the bottom line is that we're ready for this. And I would respectfully call on our Republican colleagues that aren't quite there yet to just listen to what the people of Pennsylvania are saying and take these common sense steps, interim steps even, that 85–90% of Pennsylvanians already would support.
Mm-hmm. You hope everyone gets on board.
Absolutely, and I'm hoping that we can have an honest and civil dialogue and not have rhetoric such as, marijuana causes an increase in violent crime. I actually saw one of our conservative lawmakers make that post or make that tweet, and that's simply not reflected by any...
The island of rhetoric that cannabis prohibitionists can cling to is shrinking rapidly. It just doesn't make any sense. And trying to demonize it and turn it into something, it's a product that belongs in a basket that is similar to alcohol and tobacco. And people ask me, well, would you want your kids? I'm like, no, I wouldn't want my children to smoke cannabis until they're old enough. But if they do, and experiment like most teenagers do, I would want it to be safe, pure, and regulated, instead of coming from God knows where with God knows what in it and who knows. Migrating cannabis users into that market, I think, is really the goal. And I'm grateful to the governor. Governor Wolf has exercised true leadership in this space.
Well, I want to thank you both for being on, Patrick Nightingale and, of course, Lieutenant Governor, for talking about this with us. We really appreciate it. Thanks for all of your input. Well, still to come on the KDPG Sunday edition, should college athletes be able to make money from endorsement deals? We're going to talk to a lawmaker who wants to make that happen so local kids can benefit. Stay tuned.